says. Mishenigma Dino. You have it on your alphabet base? He says, Mishenigma Dino Meis Kohen Gadol. There's a Gemara Din. As we all know, there has to be a court proceedings on the guy who killed the Shogeg. We are on Yud Aleph and Beis, the Mishnah. It says Nigma Dino. Mishenigma Dino, there was a verdict. What happened, as we know, is that after a person killed, he runs to Ari Mikla, he goes to exile, and he comes out of exile to come to the court. Then the court makes a decision. There's one of three possibilities. Either he's going to go back to the side he has to go to exile, or they decide he actually, if he killed intentionally and there was witnesses, they would kill him, or if it was a total accident, there was no negligence at all, he would go back home, back home. And here, the mission is focusing that the court made a decision that he's obligated to go. He's obligated to go to exile. Mishenigma Dino, after the court rendered a decision, he's obligated to exile. Made Kohen Gadol. The Kohen Gadol passed away. Now the Torah says that he stays in exile until the Kohen Gadol passed away. But this man never went to exile. There was a verdict. Right after there was a verdict, and let's say there's a little distance from the time from the court to the Ari Miklat, to the place of refuge. And that's where once there's a verdict, we learned the court will give him 2 Talmidei Chachamim to escort him back to exile. And at that point, let's say they're starting to escort him, and they find out that, you know what, the Kohen Gadol just died right after the Gemar Din, right after the verdict. So the Mishnah says, Harizeh Inagona. The Mishnah says a big chidush that he does not go to exile. He does not go to exile because the death of the Kohen Gadol, even though it would exempt him, even though he never stepped foot into Ori Miklat. Now, the question is, and the Gemara is going to learn this from somewhere, and the question is, what's the reason, perhaps understanding behind this? I saw a nice idea. They say that because he heard the verdict, he received the verdict. He received the verdict, and he thought that he was going to go to exile. That causes him to be humbled, and this humility that he feels that he has to run to exile will be an atonement for his sin, and therefore the Kohen Gadol's death would affect him to go out of exile. Because remember, the purpose of going to exile is to be atoned, to have atonement. And we'll see more about this later in the page of the Gemara. And therefore, as a result of the death hearing that he has to go to exile, it's a humbling thought when a person hears of such a verdict. Good morning, Mr. Greenwald.
Boker Tov, how are you?
Boker Tov, good to see you.
Sort of.
We are on Yud Aleph on the base. We are on 11b in the Gemara, in the Mishnah. Right, the law is... Right, the Kohen Gadol, we're talking about a case, we just said that the Mishnah states, you know, the Torah says that if a person kills someone unintentionally, he has to go to Ari Miklat, he has to stay in the city of refuge until the Kohen Gadol passes away. So the Mishnah says that even if he never stepped foot, Chidush is Mr. Safti, he didn't step foot in the Ari Miklat. It's true the Torah says but the Torah says V'yashav ad made the Kohen Gadol V'yashav ba. Torah says he stays there until the Kohen Gadol passes away. So he stays in the Ir Miklat until the Kohen Gadol passes away. So you would think that if he never actually stepped foot in the Ari Miklat, city of refuge. Even though the Kohen Gadol passed away, you would think that maybe he's not able to go free. And that's the chidush. Is that clear? That's the chidush of the Mishnah, that even though he never stepped foot in the Ari Mikla, but he heard a verdict that he's obligated to go to the city of refuge. And so right after that, the Kohen Gadol passed away. There was a Kohen Gadol in office at the time of the verdict. He goes free. Now the Mishnah continues. But im asher lo nigma dino meit Kohen Gadol, if before there was a Gemar Din, he was at court, or he did the murder and then he went to the city of refuge, and before the court dealt and finished his case, what happened was the Kohen Gadol passed away. So there was no verdict at this point. So far, the Kohen Gadol passed away, and then umanu achatachta, and they subsequently appointed a new Kohen Gadol to take over. And then right after that, and then there was a verdict that he has to go to exile. So now the Mishnah says when will he leave exile? He will leave exile when the second Kohen Gadol passes away. What is the chidush of this point? The case the Torah talks about, there was the same Kohen Gadol. We only see one Kohen Gadol in the case of the Torah. He kills someone, he runs to the city of refuge, and he stays there until the Kohen Gadol passes away. But here, there's not the same Kohen Gadol that was there at the time of his death, of the murder. Sorry, when he caused the murder, when he killed someone, there was Kohen Gadol number one. By the time he had his verdict, there was a different Kohen Gadol in power. And the chidush here is that it also, his freedom is dependent on the second Kohen Gadol. Now, if you recall the Gemaras that we had until now, the Gemara, what do you say? It says, right. The moment the verdict is very good. The moment the verdict is given, his sentence begins. Exactly. But we had until now the Gemara that stated that the Kohen Gadol is at a little bit at fault. Why is the Kohen Gadol at fault for the death, this unintentional death? What does the Kohen Gadol have to do with anything? See, as Mr. Safdie said, good morning, Dr. Navid. He should have prayed better. Good morning. He should have prayed that there should be no unintentional deaths happening in his time. And you as a leader have the power of your prayer to affect that. The power of your prayer is so powerful that your prayer could affect that to protect that shouldn't be any, so to speak, unintentional, accidental type of deaths. Like we gave the case, the guy falls down a ladder, and there was a baby on the bottom of the ladder. He killed the baby, chas v'shalom, and he should have been more careful going down the ladder. Now, if the Kohen Gadol would have prayed, the baby would have been a little bit over 2 feet away. The fact that the guy fell down the ladder doesn't mean there had to be a baby on the bottom of the ladder. But so many things. If we have extra protection, the baby wouldn't be there. So that could have been helped as a result of the prayer of the Kohen Gadol. That's the power of prayer that we have to realize. But here, so therefore, it makes sense. We understand that the guy cannot be released from exile until that. There needs to be an atonement for that Kohen Gadol as well. And the atonement for that Kohen Gadol who did not pray properly will happen with his death. When the Kohen Gadol dies. When the Kohen Gadol dies, now the Kohen Gadol has atonement. So now there's atonement for his death will serve as an atonement for himself. Now there's an atonement, so now you can understand why the guy goes back home, because now there's atonement for the death. But the Kohen Gadol that was alive at the time of the murder already passed away before the verdict, and now there's a new Kohen Gadol before the verdict. So they don't match. So why should sitting in the exile? What does the second Kohen Gadol do with anything here? That you sit in exile until the second Kohen Gadol comes. That's what the Gemara is going to ask this question. So stay tuned. I just gave you a little preview of the question the Gemara is going to ask. Okay, and now the Gemara says a new point. The Mishnah says a new point. Nigma dino below Kohen Gadol. If there was a verdict and there was no Kohen Gadol in office. So if there was no Kohen Gadol in office, we're going to see that the Mishnah is going to say he's going to remain in exile forever. The idea of going out of exile is only if there was a Kohen Gadol in office at the time of the verdict. So then he gets out of exile with the death of that Kohen Gadol. But if there was no Kohen Gadol in office, then this allowance to go out of exile, if there was no Kohen Gadol at the time of the verdict, he does not go out free. He remains in exile forever. And the Gemara is going to bring psukim that we learn out from psukim. We'll see more about this as we see in the Gemara. But I just want to point out, someone could ask the question, why is it fear? Right? We had this type of question that came up in the class. Why is it fear that this guy, because his, so to speak, his luck was that there was no Kohen Gadol at the time of the verdict, that he should be stuck in exile. And the other guy, who there was a Kohen Gadol at the time of the verdict, he gets out of exile. How is that fair? So we said the following. One of the Rishonim explained that the bottom line is that Hashem is behind everything. Meaning, he's not behind he's not the one who causes the guy to murder the guy. No, he's not behind that. But he's behind, because if the guy was negligent, a little bit negligent, he said every time to go to exile, it means you could have done a little bit better. You weren't grossly negligent, but you could have done a little better. But because you could ask the same question, sometimes a guy comes into exile, the Kohen Gadol is 90 years old. And the Kohen Gadol will die within a few years, most likely. Sometimes the guy comes into exile, the Kohen Gadol could be 25, 30 years old. And the guy could stay in exile for 50 years, 60 years. But if that's what Hashem had it, that this was the Kohen Gadol that was there at the time of the murder, this was a different Kohen Gadol, that means that's the type of atonement that the guy needs to stay. The guy needs to stay. It's not by chance that this guy's murder happened in a situation where the Kohen Gadol will live another 50 years, and this guy was in a case where the Kohen Gadol will live another 5 years. That means if the Kohen Gadol is going to live another 5 years, instead of live another 50 years, that means Hashem said that this is what the guy needs to have. This guy only needs 5 years in exile. This guy needs 50 years in exile. And we can say the same thing over here. If there's no Kohen Gadol at the time of the verdict, and he's going to need to remain in exile forever, and to die in exile, that's obviously what's best for him. And that's the. No, I'm saying, but that means he needs that level of kapara. He needs to end off his life. Like we said, in exile, it's not like he's sitting in prison. He's sitting in an open city, sitting in one of the cities in the Levium. He's living there. There's markets there. There's his rabbi has to come in there to teach him Torah, because the pasuk says this week's parasha we just read about, learned this week's parasha we heard. V'chai, he has to live. In order for him to live properly, he needs the part of living. It's not just the physical needs, the spiritual needs. Therefore, the rabbi has to come. So he's not sitting on on hot bread and water and in a dungeon in a cell. So therefore, he and his family will relocate there with him. I don't believe his family would stay somewhere else, and he's over there. So they would move in, and we even said on the 6 cities. There's 48 cities of refuge. There's 6 main cities. Those 6 main cities, 3 in the ones in the east of the Jordan and the 3 on the other side of the Jordan, it's rent-free. It's rent-free over there as well. So it's not like, but of course it's limited that he can't. The problem is he can't leave. That is his problem. So that's what the Gemara says. Now, The Gemara continues. The Mishnah continues. And the Mishnah says another case. Case number one was if there was a verdict and there was no Kohen Gadol in office, time of the verdict. Case number two and case number three in the Mishnah is Hahore Kohen Gadol. Someone who killed, Mr. Greenwald, is it clear so far, everything what we're saying? Okay. Hahore Kohen Gadol.
Oh, hope so.
Okay, very good. Hahore Kohen Gadol. Someone who kills a Kohen Gadol. A very great tragedy happened that somebody killed a Kohen Gadol. Every death of every Jew is a great tragedy. Someone killed a murderer, Kohen Gadol, or Kohen Gadol Shaharat, or a Kohen Gadol killed. So we have two interesting cases now. The Kohen Gadol, someone killed the Kohen Gadol, or the Kohen Gadol killed someone else. Kohen Gadol killed someone unintentionally, or someone unintentionally killed the Kohen Gadol. So the Mishnah states, Eino Yotze Misham Lola. The person who killed the high priest, first killed the Kohen Gadol, or the Kohen Gadol who killed unintentionally, they have to remain in exile forever. Dr. Navid, how's it going? Is it clear so far? Okay. So
Yes.
the question here among the commentaries is what is the case number two and case number three in the Mishnah? You see, some learn it that it means that there was a normal case, there was a normal Gemara din, there was a normal verdict with a Kohen Gadol in office, but since the crime was such a crime that the person killed the Kohen Gadol, even though it was done unintentionally, but the crime of killing a Kohen Gadol is such a high-level crime that he cannot leave the Ari Miklat. He needs to stay there in the morning. There's a minyan upstairs. Okay, whatever you want to do. You can pray here if you want. There's also a 7:30 minyan. They should be finished by around 25 after, maybe before, 20 after maybe or something. So that's how some will say that even though the Kohen Gadol's in office, but since it's such a serious, what kind of crime, and he could have been a little bit more careful. So therefore, such a crime, killing the leader of Israel, one of the leaders of Israel, the Kohen Gadol, he should not go out. He should not go out free. And similarly, someone who's a Kohen Gadol, if you're the Kohen Gadol, and you kill someone unintentionally, it's also, you're held to a higher level than the average person. The average person who kills somebody, you'll say he goes out free with the death of the Kohen Gadol. But the Kohen Gadol himself, who could have been more careful not to cause a death, and he caused the death of somebody, so he will not go out from Ari Miklat forever. That is the Kohen Gadol. If the Kohen Gadol, with two cases, someone killed the Kohen Gadol, that guy will stay in Ari Miklat, Mr. Safdie. And if the Kohen Gadol killed somebody, the Kohen Gadol, if Aaron HaKohen would kill someone unintentionally, would Aaron HaKohen go out of Ari Miklat? Okay, Aaron HaKohen never reached Eretz Yisrael, so he never could have, Ari Miklat only started, but when they came to Eretz Yisrael, after they divided the land and conquered the land, 14 years after they entered the land. But would a Kohen Gadol who kills, if a Kohen Gadol, the high priest, kills someone unintentionally, so he will never leave the exile. According to one understanding of the Mishnah, is even though he will never leave exile. That is even if they appointed a new Kohen Gadol after he killed somebody. And then as a result of that, they appointed someone else to be a new Kohen Gadol. And then they made a verdict. And he was found guilty. He will never leave exile. That is how some understand the Mishnah. So according to this opinion, the Kohen Gadol will remain in exile forever. However, what did you say? Someone else will have to be appointed. I presume if he kills some new Mishnah. If you want, you can, unless you want to do the old-fashioned way. It would seem the Mishnah doesn't talk about what happened when the Kohen Gadol kills someone, but I would definitely think that at that point we will have to appoint. We wouldn't leave him in office. You know, once he kills somebody, he can't have to have someone else take over. Others understand what did you say? If what happened? The Kohen Gadol killed B'Shogeg. So the Kohen Gadol killed unintentionally. Right. So some understand that this case of the Mishnah is a different case. Some have a different understanding of this case. That this case is talking about when there was no new Kohen Gadol appointed. That means that the guy killed, let's say Kohen Gadol killed, and they didn't appoint a new Kohen Gadol. And then there was a verdict. And the verdict was this Kohen Gadol has to go to exile. Or someone killed the Kohen Gadol, and after he killed the Kohen Gadol, there was no new Kohen Gadol. There was a vacuum. They didn't appoint a new Kohen Gadol yet, and they made a verdict. Meaning to say that case 2 and case 3 of the Mishnah are identical to case 1, which means there was a verdict of exile without any Kohen Gadol in office. The Mishnah stated that if there's a verdict of exile without any Kohen Gadol in office, the guy stays there forever. So case 2 and case 3 in the Mishnah, that the Kohen Gadol killed somebody and there was a verdict without any, and they didn't yet appoint a new Kohen, and now he automatically, let's say he lost office at that point, and they didn't appoint yet a new Kohen Gadol yet, or if someone killed the Kohen Gadol, so there's no Kohen Gadol in office, and there was a verdict, so then the people stay in exile forever. The problem that some people have with that pshat is, so why do you need to tell me that if the first case of the Mishnah stated, if there was a verdict without a Kohen Gadol in office, you told me the guy stays there forever. So what are you going to tell me this new case is that there was a verdict without a Kohen Gadol in office? Let's say the case, someone killed the Kohen Gadol, and then there was a verdict. And at the time of the verdict, there's no Kohen Gadol in office, we say the guy remains forever. It seems obvious. You told me early in the Mishnah, whether someone killed anybody, an ordinary Jew. If they killed an ordinary Jew, and there was no Kohen Gadol in office at the time of the verdict, we said, let's say someone killed an ordinary Jew, and then after they killed an ordinary Jew, the Kohen Gadol died, and then the time they made the verdict, there was no Kohen Gadol yet reappointed. So you told me in the Mishnah that the guy goes to exile, he has to stay there forever. So what are you going to tell me in a new case that someone kills, let's say, the Kohen Gadol, and he kills the Kohen Gadol, and they didn't yet appoint a new Kohen Gadol yet, and there was a verdict, he goes to exile, he remains there forever. The same way a guy kills an ordinary Jew, and if they didn't appoint a new Kohen Gadol, if there's no Kohen Gadol at the time of the verdict, he stays in exile forever. So why do you need to tell me if someone kills the Kohen Gadol, and they didn't appoint a new Kohen Gadol yet, and there was a verdict, he needs to go to exile forever?
It's still a question.
Right. I'm saying this is the question on this understanding of the Mishnah. The Mishnah makes the following statement. The Mishnah says, if somebody kills somebody and there's no Kohen Gadol at the time of the verdict, he goes to exile forever. The Mishnah says another statement, if someone kills the Kohen Gadol, he needs to stay in, he has to go to exile forever. What is the case of the Mishnah when someone kills the Kohen Gadol, he needs to stay in exile forever? Is that talking, he killed the Kohen Gadol and they never appointed a new Kohen Gadol yet, and there was a verdict, and therefore, since there was no new Kohen Gadol appointed at the time of the verdict, that's why he has to run to exile. But what about if there would be a new Kohen Gadol in office? By the time he killed the Kohen Gadol, and then they appointed a new Kohen Gadol, and then they made a verdict. Would that guy who killed the Kohen Gadol leave exile when the next Kohen Gadol passes away, or does he have to stay in exile forever? That is the question that we have here on the table. Yes.
What about the Kohen Gadol kills someone, he's going to exile? What happens to the other guys that were in exile?
Very good. We're going to see.
That way you ask.
That's a that's a great question. Right. He didn't die. Right. It's a very good question. The real question is, if Kohen Gadol kills somebody and the Kohen Gadol goes to exile, what happens with all the other people? Will they still wait? Do they need to wait until he dies? And because originally it's not Kohen Gadol anymore, right? It's a great question. What will be with all those people? Or would he have? Or will he now? Or will they wait till the new Kohen Gadol dies? But the only issue is the new Kohen Gadol wasn't there at the time of the murder and not at the time of the verdict. So, because a lot of times when we connect the release of the guy in exile, we connect him to the release of the Kohen Gadol, because the Kohen Gadol was there either at the murder or he was there at the time of the verdict, and he could have done something better. He could have prayed that the guy unintentional murder should not have taken place. He should have prayed there wouldn't be a verdict of death to the guy, of exile to the guy. But
It doesn't have the status.
right, but the only thing is the question is he's not Kohen Gadol anymore. That's his question. So at most, the pasuk says he stays there until the Kohen. What did it say? Right, they're not Kohen Gadol actively, but we see they still have a status of a Kohen Gadol. Right. Everyone will go free.
Yeah.
Because, right. Ariel's just asking, and right. Yeah, but we're going to see in the Gemara.
We relate to this Mishnah.
Right, we're going to see later in the Gemara something.
If Kohen Gadol dies, then the other one will be free.
No.
Yes.
Then, if there's another Kohen Gadol appointed
At the time, by the time he has this verdict,
then
he could go out free with the death of the second Kohen Gadol. That's how some learn the Mishnah. But others learn the Mishnah. Good morning. But others learn the Mishnah that that the Mishnah does not state that there was a new Kohen Gadol appointed before the verdict. The Mishnah states someone killed the Kohen Gadol. The Mishnah states he remains in exile forever. The Mishnah didn't state that's only talking if they didn't if they didn't appoint a new Kohen Gadol by the time of the verdict. The Mishnah says stam. He remains in exile forever. So therefore some learn the Mishnah that the Mishnah holds, even if they appointed a new Kohen Gadol before the verdict, he will remain in exile forever.
That's if you kill it.
If you kill a Kohen Gadol, right? Right. That's how some understand the Mishnah. Others say no. Others say that the case is only talking about when you didn't appoint a new Kohen Gadol. But if they appoint a new Kohen Gadol before the verdict, even though he killed the Kohen Gadol, he will go out free upon the death of the second Kohen Gadol. There are different ways of how to understand this Mishnah. Okay, continue in the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, "Ve'ena yotzei lo le'edus mitzvah lo le'ed mamon." But if somebody kills someone, and he killed the person unintentionally, and he needs to go to exile, the galut, he does not leave exile, not for edut mitzvah. Let's say he sees the new moon, right? The mitzvah to mekadesh levana, and the mitzvah to go to court, to go to the Bez, go to Yerushalayim, and tell the people that we saw the new moon, and he saw the new moon together with another Levi. As the Levi just, Mr. Betesh walks in, the Levi walks in. He's going to come with the Levi to say we saw the new moon. But can the guy who went to exile leave exile to testify about the new moon? He saw the new moon. So the Mishnah says no, he doesn't leave the exile to testify about the new moon. Even though you need him, he doesn't leave. Now, what's the reason why he doesn't leave? So some understand, because if he leaves, his life will be in danger. But if you remember, the Goel Hadam, the relative of the person who was murdered, if he finds the guy outside the exile, he might kill him. So therefore, you do not need to put your life in danger. The Torah doesn't ask of you to put your life in danger for the purpose of the mitzvah of Kiddush Levana. Kiddush Levana is an amazing mitzvah. Everybody's supposed to do that mitzvah, but not to put your life in danger by leaving the exile. Oh, so that's a good point, Mr. Safdie saying. So why don't we just give him security? Say it again. That's a great question, Mr. So it sounds like from the Mishnah that he would be a kosher witness. He didn't lose his status as a witness. Why not? Because he's not a rasha. The Torah says a rasha, a wicked person, is an invalid witness. The fact that the guy killed someone unintentionally would seem to be, he's not a wicked man. Maybe he's not such a great person, because he could have been a little bit more careful, walking down the ladder, right? He didn't want to fall. He didn't want to hit himself either. What? Something negative come out of it. That's a good point. That is true. Something very negative, a death of a fellow Jew happened, which is a very big thing, but it would, from the Mishnah, it seems to the point, we have a good chidush. From the Mishnah, it doesn't seem to invalidate him as a witness. Because if he would be invalid as a witness because of his unintentional murder, so then the Mishnah should say he can't testify. You don't have to tell me that he can't leave to testify. He's an invalid witness. You just tell me he's an invalid answer. He's not an invalid witness, it would seem. And therefore the chidush is that we don't allow him. We don't ask of him. And then Mr. Safdie's question is a great question, that why don't we just give him security? If we're afraid that the Goel Hadam is going to kill him, that relative is going to kill him, why don't we just give him security? The Mishnah continues, not even v'lo le'edut mamon. Let's say he knows testimony regarding a financial matter, money matter. He was a witness on a loan. And since he was witness on a loan, so he knows something that other people don't know. And there's a mitzvah to go ahead and come to court and testify. It says It says, if you don't testify, you're doing a big sin. If you're able to help a fellow Jew and you know some information, and you're a kosher witness, and you're supposed to come forward and tell the Jewish court what you know. Nevertheless, he also does not leave the city of refuge in order to testify regarding a financial matter. And then the Mishnah says, "V'lo leidut nefashot," even if he knows testimony regarding a murder or something involved with a murder or death or capital punishment, he doesn't leave. Good morning. He doesn't leave exile to go ahead and to testify. So that's and it seems now. So the Mishnah continues. Then the Mishnah gives another case. Afilu Yisrael tzrichin lo. Even if all of Israel. Now, by the way, it's interesting the order of the Mishnah. It says you don't leave. The guy who's in exile doesn't leave for mitzvah purposes to help facilitate a mitzvah, not to facilitate money matters, not to even in a capital punishment. So the order seems interesting. First, it seems like we're going up in order: mitzvah, money, capital punishment. So it seems that you would have thought that maybe mitzvah is greater than a financial matter. So should it be the mitzvah should be secondary, right? So shouldn't the mitzvah be secondary more than money? So it could be that maybe a lot of times there's a concept Hashem has a lot of mercy on the money of Israel. Hashem is very concerned for Jewish money. Hashem does not want people to lose their money. So sometimes God might say, you know what? For a mitzvah, God might say, I'm going to be lenient with you or whatever. I'm going to tell you, stay in exile. But to save the other person's money, which is also mitzvah, then maybe I'm going to tell you, no, you should go out of exile to save that other Jew's money. So therefore, the chiddush is that even to save the money of the other guy, a lot of times God says, if it's a mitzvah, okay, I'll let go. I'll let go for the mitzvah. God is easy when it comes to the mitzvah sometimes. But when it comes to the money of your fellow Jew, I'm just sharing an idea. It's interesting to, so therefore the Mishnah says, even if the Jewish community needs this man, we need him to be, let's say he's a general, he's an all-star general. Today in modern times, we know of Ariel Sharon, right? Sharon was one of the great generals in Israel, correct? In the history of the Jewish community in Tanakh, Yoav ben Tzruya. Yoav ben Tzruya was the general for David HaMelech. David HaMelech, as you know, he was a very victorious, King David was a very victorious king. Hashem gave him a great general. So let's say the guy who killed unintentionally was in exile, but he was such a person of such, he was a Yoav ben Tzruya. He was a man that the Jewish community needs him very badly. We need Yoav to help the military fight. Even if he's such a person of such importance and need for the Jewish community, he does not leave exile to go to help battle war. The commentaries ask, why not? You know, Pekuach Nefesh, if you're going to save the Jewish community, he's going to help as a general. Why shouldn't he leave? There are those that want to suggest that you do not have to leave at your life's expense. Because if he leaves, the Kol Adam has a right to kill him. So we don't ask of the general to leave to put himself into great danger. But others question that. Others say you should still leave to save the Jewish community. And others say what Mr. Safdie says. So give him security. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you all for joining. Thank you. Welcome to the shul. Where are you from? Brooklyn. Nice to meet you. Mazav. Tzaka Baruch. Thank you for coming in. It's not a lot. We have more during the year, more people are around. We have a certain amount on the Jaime Share is usually on. Yeah. Tell us right here. Right, you see this second thing over here? Yeah. Well,